Hello and welcome to the Light from Light podcast. Today we're going to talk about something that's quite close to both of our hearts, partly because actually it's where we met. We're going to talk a little bit about Lourdes and the most famous daughter of Lourdes, St Bernadette Subaru, and her life, why she's a saint, and also the apparitions of Our Lady that she saw. The apparitions began on the 11th of February, and Our Lady appeared to her 18 times. And maybe we should say a little bit first about how we met. We used to.
One fateful evening, I suppose.
Was it an
No,
evening?
I'm not sure actually.
I
Maybe an
thought
afternoon.
it was in the day.
No, but we every year lots of dioceses travel to Lourdes on pilgrimage, and the diocese that we travelled with was Plymouth diocese, where I grew up, and Brother Thomas and I were paired together on this coach for 27 hours as they drove from Plymouth to southern France to Lourdes.
It was a long trip. Yeah.
I think
Great fun.
27 hours is a long time, but it seemed longer.
Tell them why it seemed longer. Yeah, tell them why it seemed longer.
Everyone else was sleeping. The Thomas was telling me all about theology, which I had no history of or no knowledge of really
at the time, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and you also told me all about the Q hypothesis.
Yeah.
We won't go
into that. It'll be a completely different episode. Yeah. Dan spoke to me about rising damp. So he was thinking, as I was talking about the Q hypothesis, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were thinking, what on earth is this guy talking about? Like, what a Fruit Loop. And then I said, but there must be something that's controversial in your field, right? In the field of quantity surveying, ladies and gentlemen. And he said, I just remember you paused and he said, well, I met a lecturer once who didn't think that rising damp existed. And I was like, oh my God. I sat on a couch talking about rising damp, not what I expected. No,
it's interesting because
never mind.
It was interesting because we were probably thinking the exact same thing. Like, oh my gosh, how could this trip get any more boring?
And then we got to Lourdes and we ended up sharing a room.
Oh my gosh. With other people as well.
Yeah.
There was one guy that
but most of the time, actually, it was like, because we carried on going to Lourdes together. So I used to go with the Diocese of Shrewsbury. You'd been with Plymouth before. And then when we first went together, then every subsequent year we shared a room, right?
You would,
and I think one year we shared with somebody else.
So you'd be paired up with different people. So you'd share rooms, maybe 2, 3s or 4s. But what was interesting is I'd been to Lourdes before, but this time was really pivotal for me because Brother Thomas was able to explain lots about the life of Bernadette. And, that I think that's really helpful because, it teaches you a very important point that Christianity isn't meant to be on your own. There's meant to be a body of the church, and they're meant to be friends that journey with you along the way. And Brother Thomas was able to open up this experience of Lourdes and able to explain the location. You mentioned the apparition started in February, and the year then was 1858. Yes. When that started. So just to situate ourselves a little bit, 1858, and in southern France, in a place that wasn't very well known, the Pyrenees Mountains. Is that right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. And the foothills of the Pyrenees.
Yeah, and not a very populous place at all. A little unknown place.
I think there were at the time. I think the population of the town was 4,000 people. I think. Yeah, very small.
And if you go there now. Obviously looks quite different, but I mean, there's still probably a feel of this very rural place. You still have to journey to get there, and you're journeying into the foothills of the Pyrenees, into the mountains. So in this really rural place, Mary appears to Bernadette, who, by all accounts, is a really quite insignificant lady. She's a young lady, young girl, really, of 14.
She was a teenager. Yeah.
14 years old. She hadn't received her first Holy Communion because she
couldn't read, she couldn't write. She couldn't read or write, partly because she was staying at home looking after her siblings.
Mm-hmm.
her parents would always say, "Oh, next year you'll make your Holy Communion. Next year you'll make your Holy Communion."
She had she had a hunger to
Yeah,
receive
yeah,
her
she
communion.
did.
She really
Yeah.
wanted to, and it said actually, skipping forward a bit, but when she received her first Holy Communion, the priest looked down at her, not realizing it was Bernadette, and there was a glow around her head.
Oh,
Yeah, as she's about to receive communion. So rather beautiful. Yeah. So Bernadette didn't read, didn't write, um, and yeah, used to help the
yeah.
family.
By the time of the
Work.
apparitions as well, Bernadette's family actually, by that stage, had become quite poor. So she was born in a mill. The mill, actually, because the town of Lourdes used to be actually an English town when large parts of France were owned by the English crown because of conquest and things, and then the English were driven away. And in the end, there was this mill which was let to Bernadette's mother's parents, and then the father died, and Bernadette, sorry, not Bernadette's mother. Yeah, no, sorry, Bernadette's mother's parents, and Bernadette's grandmother used to do the accounts, but the grandfather died, and so then it was like, oh well, who's going to come and take over the running of the mill? And they had lots of people turn up as potential suitors, but only one of them had experience of running a mill, and it was somebody who had worked in a neighboring mill called Francois, Bernadette's father, but he didn't want to marry the eldest daughter. He wanted to marry uh, uh, well, Bernadette's mum, who is one of the younger girls, and there was actually quite a substantial age difference between the two. They got married, and they started running the mill. Um, they were very charitable, so people would come to get their bread and things from the mill, or the flour, sorry, from the mill and things, and they would give away like either bits of wine or bits of bread or something to the customers. They would do things on, well, my parents' generation would call it on tick, meaning that it would be on credit essentially, if they were particularly struggling. But then eventually Bernadette's grandmother moved out into another mill. Eventually she died, and then they lost a lot of business when Bernadette's grandmother died. They went to the competitors, and Bernadette's family then became poorer and poorer, to the point where they couldn't afford the rent of the mill anymore, and so then they move out into another place, and from that place things went from bad to worse, and eventually they end up in Le Cachot, the dungeon, the prison, which actually had stopped being a prison. Um, because it wasn't safe. It was so run down that they transferred the prisoners, somewhere else. But Bernadette's family had, well, actually, I think it was Bernadette's father made a plea to their cousin, who in the end possessed this prison, and said, please let us, rent this place from you. So you had a lot of people staying essentially in one room. And it was the conditions weren't great. Bernadette loved growing up for her first 10 years or so in the mill where she was born. Things deteriorated. So by the time of the apparitions, the 11th of February, 1858, Bernadette and her family were essentially living in one room in a prison that had been decommissioned because the conditions were so bad. So it's from this place that Bernadette sets out and meets Our Lady.
Yeah. So there is actually a first-hand account that's written by Bernadette, called "My Name is Bernadette," and it's online, so you can read it yourself. But we thought it'd be quite interesting to actually read from that account, a few, well, large snippets from it, because I think from that you can see her own humor and her own
Personality
holiness.
coming through.
Yeah, her own personality, and she accounts for a lot of a lot of the accounts themselves of these events, and they're corroborated by other people as well. So she refers to a lot of other people, and obviously when she's writing it, those people are alive as well. So shall we read a little bit from that, and we can chip in with comments as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So these are her own words. So early on the 11th of February, 1858. My sister, Toinette, aged 11, and my friend, Jean Adaby. So Brother Thomas is the expert on French French.
That is not true.
So the friend was 12, and they set off with me to gather firewood for my mother. They crossed the mill stream by the river while I sat down to take off my shoes, and I heard a noise like the sound of a storm. I looked at the trees near the river, but nothing was moving. I was frightened, and I stood up straight. Bewildered, I looked across the mill stream to a niche above a cave in the rock of Massabielle. A rose bush on the edge of the niche was swaying in the wind. It was all that moved. All else was still. A golden cloud came out of the cave and flooded the niche with radiance. Then a lady, young and beautiful, exceedingly beautiful, the like of whom I had never seen, stood on the edge of the niche. She smiled and smiled at me, beckoning me to come closer, as though she were my mother, and she gave me to understand in my soul that I was not mistaken. Interesting.
Notice how she hasn't said anything. Right? That's very interesting. The first time that Our Lady appears to Bernadette, she doesn't say anything. It's a silent apparition. And you're right. I mean, she describes her she doesn't identify her as the Blessed Mother or as Our Lady. That's not something that she claims to know, and she's interrogated on that later, as we'll talk about, I'm sure. And but she simply calls her that one, or the beautiful lady. And
or even just simply the lady.
The lady, yeah. Or I think in the local dialect, in the patois, it's like aquero or something, which is like that one. And she, really interestingly, she when she sees the statue that's made after all of these things are assessed and judged by the appropriate authorities and things, a statue is made of the lady, and she says that the statue is not beautiful enough. She looks too old, and that she's too big. She described the lady as small, the most beautiful thing that she'd ever seen. And when she's actually interrogated by the police and the commissioner's like, well, is this lady, more beautiful than so-and-so, more beautiful than Mrs. So-and-so down the road? And she says, there is no comparison. She's the most beautiful lady that you will have ever seen, the most beautiful you'll have ever seen. And so, yeah, but very interesting that when this lady first comes, silence. Yeah.
And for the first few times that the apparitions take place, she doesn't speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She goes on, the lady was dressed in white with a white veil on her head and a blue sash at her waist. A rosary of white beads on a golden chain was on her arm. On that cold winter's day, her feet were bare, but on each foot was a golden rose, radiant with the warmth of summer. I went upon my knees and took my rosary from my pocket. The lady took the rosary from her arm, and I began to cross myself. My arm could not move until the lady herself made a beautiful sign of the cross. The lady let me pray the rosary on my own. She passed the beads through her fingers. She did not say the words. She signed for me to come closer, but I did not dare. She smiled at me. She bowed to me. She disappeared into the niche. The golden cloud faded, and I was all alone. What's interesting is is how her parents take this straight away, and I think it speaks of how the parents are to her. So Bernadette tells Toinette, her cousin, what happened, and at evening prayer, her eyes, Bernadette says her eyes were filled with tears, and her mum asks her, is anything wrong? And Toinette answers for her, saying what had happened, and her mother's response was, it was a white stone that you saw, and my father thought it better that I should not return to Massabielle. So initially they don't believe her, as most people wouldn't believe a story like that. It sounds fanciful, right? But later then she asks her father for permission, and you remember her account of that. She goes to ask the father for
Yeah.
permission.
Well, in between that time, I mean, so when you're right, I mean, when she's coming back, she tells the two girls that she's with, Toinette and Jeanne, that, did you not see her? They didn't see anything. And she's talking about it like the whole way, and her experience. They were worried about her with her asthma and all the rest of it. They came back with lots of sticks and things, wood and some bones. And so she talked about it the whole way back. And she says, don't tell mum, don't tell them anything. And of course she does. And Bernadette's disappointed by that, but she doesn't deny anything. She saw what she saw. And but Jeanne, the friend who lives just around the corner, like in the next road, she runs out and tells everybody else. She goes and tells everybody else. So then already people are hearing the story of what Bernadette saw from these other people who were there. But yeah, when she's later on, her parents don't want her to return to the grotto, and there's an account in a book by Francois Trochu, who is a Monsignor, from what I remember, or a canon maybe, and he writes a book called St Bernadette Subaru, and in that he tells an account of her father picking up some spare work, working with some horses, and she goes to her mother and says, "Can I go back to the grotto?" After she's been forbidden from going, and her mother says no, and eventually the mum says, "Ask your dad." How many times does that happen in people's families, right? Go and ask your dad. So she goes and asks her dad, and her dad says no. And then it's the person who he's working with who actually, I think, owns the horses or the stable, the business where he's working that day. And he says, well, if the lady's carrying a rosary, she can't be evil. So just let the kid go, And so in the end, he lets her go. But then something else happens then, the apparitions, that then makes them reluctant. And by this stage, then things are going to grow even more. And all of the excitement created around the apparitions makes the family really reluctant and worried about what's going to happen. Partly because they're worried about the authorities. And remember, this is post-revolutionary France. It's not that long after people were being guillotined, religious being guillotined and things. So, I mean, so they're worried. And the father had been accused of stealing previously and had been imprisoned by the person who would later come to question Bernadette. And when they go into the prison, they find a plank of wood against the wall, and they say, well, this is, the corpus, I think it's corpus delictus or something like that. And because a farmer said, a plank of wood has gone missing, from my farm, but that wasn't the primary thing that they were looking for, but it was something that they found. And he said, well, I just saw this plank of wood by the road, so I picked it up. But he still spent some time in the jail, and eventually they released him. But I'm sure that scrutiny would have stuck with them, and the fact that they'd fallen from grace. They knew that people were talking about them and their situation. They were living, in very difficult conditions, and this might be something that makes their life a little bit more difficult because people are going to be talking about them again. Yeah,
it does make it difficult. I mean, the father then allows Bernadette to go, and she goes with a group of people. They pray the rosary, but Bernadette brings some holy water with her, and she says, if you come from God, stay. If you don't, go away. And she's sprinkling the holy water, and she says in her own words, the more I sprinkled, the more she smiled. I knelt and I gazed at her lovingly. And then some of the group ran frightened to Madame Nicolau. I say that right? Madame Nicolau nearby. And Madame returned with Antoine, her son, who used all his strength to carry me to his mother's home. Along the way, this is really beautiful. Along the way, the lady kept in front of me and slightly above me. Only when Antoine carried me into his home did the lady disappear and I returned to earth. My mother had come to Antoine's house and she was crying, "You are making everyone run after you." Can you imagine? She said, and Anton's wife reassured my mother, and from that moment, my mother stood by me and never doubted me.
Mm.
Beautiful.
An interesting thing about Antoine, he was a farmer and he was in his 20s. He was a stocky guy. He was used to, by all accounts, he was used to carrying heavy loads and and he says that he struggled to move Bernadette on his own, and she kept trying to turn back. Almost like she was trying to go back to the grotto, but he said that she just looked radiant and she was beaming. Almost like there was a glow about her, and that she was entranced. A lot of the writers talk about this as being an ecstasy. She was an ecstasy. She was uh, almost oblivious to what other people were doing around her. There's another funny part about this same incident where when she's going to the grotto, she feels this inner compulsion to go down, and when she gets this zigzaggy path, she runs ahead of all the others and gets there before them and takes her position. So excited. And this one time, her friend who had been there the first time, Jeanne, she was disappointed that they'd all sort of ran off away from her, and she brought some other girls from the school. And she threw a rock from on top of the Massa Biel, and she threw this rock at her and it hit her, and the other girls all shouted out, Jeanne, you've killed Bernadette, you've killed her. And she runs down and she realizes that she couldn't be dead because she was kneeling upright, and but she was very difficult to move, and they panic because they said that she looked slightly pale. She was transfixed in this particular apparition, and that they couldn't move, so they worried. So some people went, yeah, you're right, Antoine. And others, so Jeanne ran straight to the Subaru home to get the mum. And this is why the mum was waiting for them. And she was obviously really worried after that. Yeah. She was really worried about what had happened.
But I thought that line there was beautiful. That the lady kept in front of me and slightly above me. She only disappeared when I entered the home. So I didn't know that until recently, that she had journeyed with Bernadette to the space. Almost like taking care of her, sort of showing that that Our Lady is our mother and takes care of her, takes care of us in that way. Yeah, there's more than, I mean, there's a lot to cover, I suppose, about her words, and we won't cover all of it, but another time they go, and Bernadette goes with Madame Millet and Antoinette Perret, and they go to the grotto, and they bring a pen and some ink and a piece of paper, and they began to pray the rosary, and the lady appeared, surrounded with light. I went into the grotto, and the lady came down from the niche and stood beside me. If you are from God, I said, please tell me what you want, else go away. At from God, she smiled. At else go away, she shook her head, but she didn't speak. I asked, would you be so kind to write down your name? There is no need to write what I have to say, she answered, and she laughed. Would you have the graciousness to come here for 15 days? And Bernadette puts these words, and I'm not sure how to say it because it's in her own local dialect, era gracia. I'm not sure how you say that, but these were her exact words. Bernadette continues, and I was astonished she should speak to me in pathos and in a manner so gracious. I will ask my parents' permission, I replied, and I will come. So interesting. So pathos is the local language,
Patois,
right?
yeah,
Patois.
patois. So yeah, and this is how Our Lady talks to her. She talks to her in this local dialect, which is remarkable. There's something there that you said, which is really amazing. Would you do me the favor? Would you, Our Lady, Queen of Heaven, our mother, the mother of our Savior, will you do me the favor of returning here for 15 days? Showing that graciousness that she has. On this time when she goes down, really interestingly, she's not there with her classmates. the kids, because they're all talking about it in the school. She's spoken to the sisters about it. The sisters are saying it's better to be forgotten, forget this, put it out of your mind, and the sisters keep saying that to her, put this out of your mind, put this out of your mind. The sisters who are teaching her when she gets the chance to go to school and she's not looking after her siblings and things. But these two ladies who go with her say to Bernadette's mum, well, if we go, with her really early in the morning and it's just us and the kids aren't going, you don't have to worry because, there'll be adults there will be going. And so her mum then lets her go back. So I think one of them may be her aunt, perhaps one of them a neighbor. I could be mistaken about that, but from memory, yeah, but that beautiful line, would you do me the favor of returning here? So the lady now, she speaks to her. The pen and paper is an interesting one because one of the ladies who went down with Bernadette, there was lots of speculation about who this lady was. Was it somebody? And one of the ladies who went with her was worried that it was somebody who'd been part of their synodality, their synodality, their sodality, their group of like the Children of Mary or something, who died earlier that year, and she was worried that this lady might be in purgatory and saying, "I need prayers, I need masses said." So it was also that so it was one of the ladies who brought the pen and paper. So she thought that not just simply writing down, her name, but if this was her friend who died, she could write down what she needed. I need masses said. I need prayers said for my soul because I'm suffering in purgatory. Because there is this this notion in Catholicism that God may permit souls from purgatory to ask for prayers. Padre Pio said that he saw people asking for prayers and masses to be said for them because they were suffering in purgatory. So that's what this lady thought was happening, and that's one of the things that made her bring that in the first place. But yeah, a lady, as you, well, Bernadette obviously rightly says, because she was there.
Well, we're continued. There's a very interesting line then that this lady says then to Bernadette. Bernadette says, she responded, "I do not promise to make you happy in this life, but in the next." Then she continues, "Go and tell the priest that a chapel must be built here." So there's a few things going on here, but then I thought this is really beautiful. Her eyes rested on Antoinette for a moment. She smiled on her, and then she disappeared. Because when we think of this, when we think now, when we look back, who are the main people here? Mary, the lady,
Bernadette.
and Bernadette. Yeah. And they seem to be the two main people that we think of. Mary appears and she sees Antoinette, this lady, who we don't know much about, but she stares on her and she loves her. She smiled on her. Remind me of the words of Jesus with the young rich man. He looked at him and he loved him. Yeah, beautiful. Do you want to say anything about that line then, that she says, "I do not promise to make you happy in this life, but in the next"?
Really, no. I mean, that's very often when people are talking about Bernadette and the apparitions at Lourdes, that's one of the most quoted lines, isn't it? And I find myself, sometimes in community life, something happens and, and a brother will be like, "Oh," and I'll say something like that, Our Lady said to St Bernadette, "I promise not to make you happy in this life, but in the next," This brings up in my mind, actually, that, when people think about Fatima, they think about the 3 secrets of Fatima. But what people don't often remember is actually Our Lady gave 3 secrets to Bernadette when she was questioned about them, whether they were about France, and she said, "No, they're not about France." And this priest says, "Are they personal?" And she said, "Yes." And she is told not to tell any man. And this again brings out her humour. She's told not to tell any man, and somebody says, "Oh, but will you tell the Pope?" And Bernadette replies, "Is the Pope a man?" And he says, "Well, of course he's a man." He said, "Oh, well, then I cannot tell even the Pope." But these were personal things anyway. A priest who speaks to her about it says, "Oh, well, I'm sure I know one of these secrets." that you were to become a nun. He's interviewing her after she's already entered the convent, and Bernadette doesn't say yes or no this time. She just looks down and looks sorrowful in that moment. But again, that I do not promise to make you happy in this life, but in the next. Bernadette suffers a lot in her life. She suffers a lot for the truth, what she knows to be true about these apparitions, but she also has a lot of health problems. Not only the asthma, which she develops just before her teenage years, I think, but also later on in life when she dies at a very young age, 35, and she says to somebody, I will die young. Our Lady told me that I would die young. She has this tumor on her right knee, and she has the tumor for the best part of a decade. And by the end of her life, like, her bones are decaying, and it's incredibly painful. No comfort, no rest, essentially. So she suffers much. But again, Our Lady said, I do not promise you happiness in this life, but in the next. There's another story that I think that we'd heard about Bernadette, and was there a young man in the village that she may have been interested in?
Yeah, you see that in the film, the famous film, The Song
Right.
of Bernadette.
Yeah.
You see that depicted, but
And might that
don't know
be
where
a
it came
reason
from.
why religious life is something which seems to be something which brings some degree of sorrow?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so we'll continue. So then she visits the 6th time, and hundreds of people were kneeling by the grotto, but I scarcely noticed them, she said. For a moment, the lady looked over my head and sorrow overshadowed her. I asked her why, and she answered, pray for sinners. She was surrounded by light as she disappeared. The glow faded, but its warmth lingered in my soul. That's one of the main messages that Mary comes with apparitions. We see later repentance is
Penance.
penance.
Yeah. She repeats that
Yes,
often.
penance. Yeah, or repentance. The first words of Jesus: repent and believe in the gospel. Yeah, it seems that the importance then of this message from this lady is in continuity with the message of our Lord. And we were saying Mary points to Jesus, and that's what she does with these apparitions, as we see a little bit later. 2 other people come into my life today, she continues. One was our Lord's doctor, the other was the police commissioner. Unknown to me, as I was talking to the lady, Dr. Dozo, am I saying that right? Dr. Dozos? Dozo had taken my arm and placed his fingers on an artery to feel the pulse. It was calm and regular, he wrote. Nothing suggested Bernadette was under undue nervous excitement. He eventually became a man of deep faith. He was the first doctor to care for the sick when they came on pilgrimage to the grotto. So something that still continues to this day. There are doctors that there's a hospital on the site itself. Yeah. So doctors, and this still continues today, this practice, and there are nurses there. There are nurses who travel with the pilgrims who are sick to this place. And Dominique Jacome was the other person, the police commissioner. He was suspicious of everyone, Bernadette writes. He took hold of my hood as I left the church, and he said, follow me, but in the local dialect. He took me to his office and began questioning. My name is Bernadette, I said. I could not say if I was 13 or 14, as I had never learned to count. So I think this sort of shows Bernadette's humour as well. He tried to suggest that I was seeing Our Blessed Lady. I insisted I only saw Quero, which means lady. He wrote down with a goose quill every word I said, and then he repeated it back to me. He twisted it, untruthful, incorrect. Sir, I protested, you are altering everything I say. Brazen hussy, he blazed, and the tassel of his cap shook as he ranted in anger. So I thought this is quite interesting because it shows the level of opposition. What does Bernadette actually gain from making up these stories? Very, very little,
Well,
if
he
anything.
said that the family, so, and this is something that she says to him, isn't it? That, like, I'm not saying this to gain something. And he points out that there was a lady, a neighbor, who had given a gift to the family. She makes it very, very clear that she doesn't accept any gift or go and visit any person or engage in anything for her own benefit, but actually to make the other person feel good, to share in their life, So yeah, I mean, there was a concern that, and this comes up again when she's questioned, that they say, are you not worried that people are going to think that you're just in this for profit? And she says, I do not seek to materially profit anything. Now, remember, of course, that this is the same inspector who'd arrested her father, and how confident she's able to speak. There's something about Bernadette which is actually quite tough. There's another great quote that she has, my job is to inform, not to convince, which again shows that firmness of character, which makes her a very good and credible witness.
Yeah, I mean, the opposition is not just from the authorities; it's also from her friends. This is the next day at catechism class. The girls shunned me as a criminal, and the sisters superior thanked God that I had been arrested for misbehavior. One woman called me a brat, and another one slapped on my face.
Mm.
So the opposition, and there were other people that were kind. She says Sister Damien was kind to me, but you see the level of opposition is quite something, really.
And then she was called a liar, and all sorts of things. She also had another very funny, as a bit of an aside, um, uh, encounter with Jacomet's wife and Jacomet's young daughter. She'd been learning to crochet, I think, with the sisters, and she made these little sort of socks, and she said, oh, I'm going to give these to, this is the young girl now, Jacomet's daughter, I'm going to give these to the first poor child that I see, even if it is a Spaniard, she says. And she sees Bernadette walking with her younger brother, and the younger brother doesn't have any socks on. And so her mother whispers in her ear, and she goes up and she says, come with me to our house. And her father is so proud that his daughter had given away these stockings to Bernadette's brother, to somebody who is in need. I'm going to give these to the first, most poorest child that I see, even if it is a Spaniard. And so they had also received some kindness from this family as well. It wasn't all harsh. But yeah, it must have been a very intimidating thing to be brought before the police at such a young age. And she was firm. And when she says, you're twisting my words, it was because he kept changing her testimony with, oh, the lady was wearing a white sash and she had a blue veil. And she said, no, it was a white veil and a blue sash. And she had a gold flower on her sash. No, she had gold flowers on her feet. And that's when she says, you're changing everything I've said to you. And she gets frustrated with him in that way, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's an honesty to how she interacts with the policeman, but not the other way around. Can you tell us a little bit about what happens with the spring and the mud? Can you remember much about that?
Yeah, so she goes down to the grotto again, and by this time there is a big crowd, a large crowd now. The numbers are growing, and they follow her down to the grotto. Often somebody will bring a blessed candle. She goes down there, and I'll describe what the people see. The people see her again looking at the lady, but this time it's not just being transfixed. She's also moving and she's looking around. So she's not taken sort of away from her surroundings in that sense. She's lucid in a different way. And she looks towards the river, and she starts walking towards the river, and then she stops, and then she turns, and she's looking around, and she goes back, and then she looks around again. And eventually she goes into the cave, and she picks up some moss off the floor and starts eating it. Later, when she's asked why, she says, "Oh, it's for poor sinners." And she starts digging in the ground, and eventually she gets to actually just a small trickle of water at the time, and she starts, rubbing it on her face and washing herself in this muddy water. And people start saying, "Oh my God, she's gone mad. She's eating grass off the ground. Like, surely this must be some sort of psychological condition, because why on earth would she be rubbing this seemingly muddy moisture over her hands and her face, and eating this moss, and still sort of then looking back to this lady sort of smiling?" And of course they can't see anything in the niche, they can't see anything. So they start taking this as a sign that she's not well. She's not well. And people then start again saying, "Oh, fraud, fraud, fraud." But isn't it interesting how all those people who think this is all made up and it's all a fraud, they still turn up every single time. And as time goes on, more and more people turn up, and they're still fascinated by this. They're fascinated by it. They're curious. There are those people who want to disprove it. There are those people who want to sort of show up the church, so-called free thinkers who want to show up the church for, the mad institution that they think that she is. And they want her to be shown to be a fraud and mad. But I also think there's probably part of them that's wondering, but what if it is all true? But what if? Because they keep coming down. If it's completely mad, why bother? Right? It's completely mad, why bother? But people do start talking badly about her again, and there's division amongst the crowd. Oh, a police officer says to her, "Oh, stop all this pretense. My eyes are the same as yours. I see nothing." Right?
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. You can see, you could be looking at the same thing and not, you see something and I don't. Interesting. But she writes in the account then that the water then it turns to water. It turns to a spring, and the lady says, "Go drink at the spring and wash in it." And she says that the people who laughed in the morning when all of them saw that the mud was now water,
Yeah.
they
It
then
grew over the
obeyed.
day, right? It grew
Yeah.
over the day.
And then they obeyed over the day. It turns from mud to
The
a
spring.
spring with pure, clear water. And there's this account then of this father. She puts it like this: that Louis asked his daughter to bring some of the water. Years before, in the quarries, Louis had injured his right eye, and his vision was steadily deteriorating. He bathed his eye with the water, and the next day he said to the doctor, "I am cured." The doctor wrote a sentence on some paper, placed it in his hand, placed his hand over Louis's good eye and said, "Read this." And he read it aloud, the whole sentence. And the gospel from the mass that morning told of the pool in Jerusalem where so many of the sick, the blind and the lame were healed. And the people who scoffed when I was washing in the spring eventually treasured its waters as a grace from heaven.
So we have the first miracle. Maybe at this point we can say something about, in the modern shrine there, they have something called the Lourdes Medical Bureau, and it's made up of all sorts of doctors from very many different backgrounds. You do have some Christians, you have some Catholics, but you also have some atheists, some Muslims, some Jewish doctors, and they investigate people who claim to have had some form of miraculous cure. And the criteria that have to be met are so strict that there's only a very limited number. I forget the number now of miracles that have been approved.
It's around 70.
Around
Yeah.
70
One
something.
recently, the other day, actually,
Yeah.
was announced. Yeah. But
Yeah.
it's an independent
Yeah.
board. These are doctors that sit on the board.
They're looking they're not looking to see whether it's a miracle or not. That's a judgment that's made by the church after this medical evaluation. What they're looking for is a naturalistic explanation, because if we can find something, as some reason as to why this has gone, then we can help other people. And if you think about it has to be, they don't like talking about cures in the medical profession. They prefer to say something's in remission. So it has to be, in order to be approved to go to the diocese, it has to be something permanent, a permanent healing. It can't be partial. It has to be total. So let's say that you're, I don't know, let's say that you're blind, completely blind. It can't be that you get some of your sight back, as far as I know. It has to be complete healing. It can't be that the tumor of your cancer has shrunk. It has to go. It has to be something that's, again, able to be associated with Lourdes. There are lots and lots of criteria, and they test these people for years, psychological tests, medical tests, and sometimes people just get so fed up of being poked and prodded. They think, you know what, I don't care if you recognize me as a miracle or not, actually. I'm just grateful to be well again. And they pull out of the process. So there are many more miracles at Lourdes, actually, that are there, but people often pull out the medical process because it takes a long time now,
Yeah. And of course, the medical process isn't necessary for a lot of people. I think lots of people who go there would recognize that there are great miracles of conversion of faith. I mean, I count the place for a great moment of return to God, really, during a pilgrimage there. And then, there are countless number of people who go there and have that similar experience of repentance and penance and returning to the Lord through the intercession of this lady, of Mary.
And psychological healings of relationships which have been fractured and broken. Someone will go into Lourdes and then realize that actually maybe they should reconcile with that person who they've had a long feud with, or maybe there is more to this than God stuff than meets the eye. You're right, yeah. So just to say, as you were saying earlier about the doctors still being on site, not only to care for the sick, but also looking at those inexplicable cures which have come out suddenly. One of the other criteria is that it has to be something that you're not receiving treatment for. So let's say it's a cancer and it's completely disappeared, even if it's something that let's say you have neuroblastoma and you're receiving treatment for it, and all they're doing is they think delaying your death, for example, or pancreatic cancer or something like that, right? And then it disappears. They will not. The bishops won't declare it a miracle if you're receiving any form of treatment, even if the doctors will say, even with this treatment, it should have only prolonged their life by a few months or a year or something. They should not have got better. If they're receiving any form of treatment, the bishops won't petition for this to be recognized as a miracle. It's a very, very high bar, which is why they're so small. And if you ever go to Lourdes, there is a place where you can go and you can see the testimonies and the accounts and the medical records and things like that. In years gone by, they used to have crutches hanging on the wall of the grotto of all of these people who were grateful. We call them ex votos. All of these crutches on the wall that were given in thanksgiving to Our Lady because they had been healed. They hadn't all been officially declared miracles, but nevertheless, the lame could walk again.
Yeah. Shall we? We'll continue with another funny story, then another funny account of what Bernadette said. So there was an evening then where a policeman came and he took Bernadette and her mother to the imperial prosecutor. And she says, for 2 hours we stood there, questioned, mortified, till he threatened to throw us into prison. My mother burst into tears and the prosecutor took fright. He said, there are chairs, you can sit down. My mother took a chair, but the little man in the big uniform had threatened her so rudely that I said, no thanks, I might dirty it. And I sat on the floor like the tailors do in Lourdes. He still kept trying to trap me by reading out answers I had not given, till my cousin, Andrew Soyor, banged on the shutters, and then they walked home. But you see the level of difficulty that they have to go through. She gives accounts of other miracles that take place as well that are very interesting to read as well. But I just wanted to go on to the parish priest. So this is Bernadette again. The lady had said on her third visit, go and tell the priest that a chapel must be built here. I knew in my soul that she meant Father Paramal. He was a man whose heart belonged to the poor. For years, he had paid the rents of 35 families in Lourdes to save them from eviction. I saw him in his garden and decided to approach him. "What do you want, and why have you come?" he asked. "Father, I have come from the lady." "Oh, yes, you say you see visions, and you upset the whole countryside with your stories. Do you know the lady's name?" "No, father, I do not, but I see her as clearly as I see you, and she talks to me as clearly as you talk to me. She is surrounded with light and wants a chapel built at Massabielle." Father said that he would not deal with a nameless vision. He called me an impostor and a show-off. Gruff though he was, he never humiliated me or my mother. Eventually, he became my greatest friend. Isn't that
Sweet, isn't
interesting?
it? Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
There's something about his attitude which actually reminds me a little bit of Bernadette. Not, you're an imposter and a show off, but that sort of brashness, the rough and ready sort of attitude. She has as deferential as Bernadette can be. She can also stand her ground, just as he is doing. Um, the door that she walked through is still there in Lourdes, and you can go and visit it. But he also asks for a sign, doesn't he? Later on, he doesn't just want the
Yeah.
lady's name. There's also a question about, well, who's going to pay for this chapel?
Yeah, he says here, a chapel, who will pay for it? And if your
Your woman
lady
must be
wants
wealthy.
processions,
Yeah,
yeah, if your lady wants processions, she should send you to the bishop. You don't even know her name. Ridiculous.
yeah.
Can you imagine?
I can very well imagine, yeah. And he's also going to be worried about the spiritual well-being of his flock, and what if this isn't true? And let's test it. Let's see how it is. Um, and I'm sure the inspector will be, breathing down his neck as well. And those free
Yeah, and the
thinkers,
mayor trying to put this
the parish
to
priest is
stop.
putting this poor girl up to this. So yeah, really, really interesting.
You mentioned the other thing that he asked for. He says that, well, if she wants her chapel, let her tell me her name, let her tell her name, and let her make the rose bush blossom. Then I will build a chapel, and if I build it, I tell you, it will not be a small one.
Mm. It's also quite interesting that Father Peyramal himself is an expert on roses, from what I know of him. If I'm remembering correctly, he had a real great love of roses, and he was an expert on roses.
Mm-hmm.
There was already in the Chapel of the Apparitions, sorry, Chapel of the Apparitions, getting ahead of myself. Already in the grotto, there was an eglantine bush, and there was already a rose bush there. But because of the time of year that it was, it should not be blooming. So that's why he's saying, well, let it bloom out of season.
Yeah,
Let it
yeah,
bloom.
and
This
that's the
lady
big
is
thing.
from heaven. Why can't she make this bloom?
Yeah.
So
So she returns a few times, and she asks this lady then what's her name. On this one time here, she says I asked her name, um, but she only smiled. When I asked her to make the rose bush blossom, she smiled the more. So she's saying this to the priest, but she still wants the chapel. She's saying to the priest, very very direct, and he insists. I need her name, and I need the rose bush to blossom. Yeah. So this continues on, and meanwhile, she says the public prosecutor tries to crush her. The people pester her. The police follow her. They watch her. She says, "What my parents suffered from the town officials, only eternity will reveal." So again, she's at the real difficulty of life there. Even the mayor as well. He says he starts to accuse Bernadette of healing people, and that she should be imprisoned for this. So it becomes very difficult. Then on March the 25th, she's roused from sleep with an inner insistence to go to the grotto.
why is that date important?
Why is it important?
It's Feast of the Annunciation.
I thought
Feast of the Annunciation.
we
Yeah.
couldn't pass over it. Oh, it's important.
There was a mass going on in the chapel for the Feast of the Annunciation early in the morning, when she was running down to the as when she was in the grotto. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the final apparition. Oh no, there's one after that. There's one after that at least.
I think there's one up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the last one, she doesn't actually get close to the lady at all, and she has to look across the bank, right? But in this one, the lady gives her name.
Yes, that's right. So when Bernadette gets there, she says that the lady was waiting there, and she says
Where have you been?
in her own words, yeah, where have you been? I
Looking at a what?
apologized. Yeah, I apologized for keeping her waiting, for I had caught a cold. She smiled. I knelt down. We said the rosary together. I like the way Bernadette recounts this, just like this happened, this happened, this happened. You know, she's not really trying to flourish it with lots of lots of language. Then the lady came very close to me. I told her how I loved her and how happy I was to see her again. Mademoiselle, I said, would you be so kind as to tell me who you are, if you please? She only smiled. I said again, would you be so kind as to tell me who you are? I said this 4 times altogether. The lady extended her hand towards the ground, swept them upwards to join them on her heart, raised her eyes, but not her head to heaven, leaned tenderly towards me and said,
I'm not going to say it in patois. She
no,
said,
you say it beautifully, go on.
I can't say it. I can't say it. Que voi era Immaculate Conception.
Ah, there you go.
I
You said
think.
it beautifully.
I think that's it. I think that's
That's
it.
pronounce it. But she smiled at me and then she disappeared and I was alone. I did not understand the words, but I knew the priest would. I knew also the lady loved the priest. Leaving my candle at the grotto, I went straight to Father
Paramount.
Paramount, saying the lady's name to myself along the way. Father was waiting
So
for
she
me.
didn't forget it.
Yeah. I bowed and I said, I am the Immaculate Conception, but obviously in the local dialect. Seeing his surprise, I explained, and I said it again. The good priest stood there, stunned. Suddenly he stammered, do you know what that means? I shook my head and I said, no. Remember, this is a young girl that hasn't had her catechism classes because they've been in French and she doesn't understand French. And now this lady appears and speaks in her own dialect. Then how can you say the words if you do not understand them? I repeated them all along the way. She still wants the chapel. The priest by now was deathly pale, but he pulled himself together, saying, go home now. I will see you another day. Years later, I learned that Father wrote to the bishop that night. And as he wrote, his heart filled up with emotion and his eyes were filled up with tears. Why is that so significant?
What?
Why is why did he get so emotional? Why was that the confirmation that he took?
Well, how would this young girl know that? And she herself says that she doesn't know what it means. 4 years earlier, of course, the Pope had defined the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, which, I mean, the content of which actually had been believed by the faithful for a long time. Certainly this is something that Bernadette wouldn't really have known about, and it wouldn't really have been part of catechism classes for personal communion. She'd received some classes, um, but this wouldn't have been something that would be part of the usual catechism classes. And essentially, what she's saying is, I am the one who is free from original sin. I am the sinless one. Um, so it's I am the one who has never known a moment in her life where I have not been in friendship with God. I have always been a friend of God all my life. Um, uh, it's I am the Immaculate Conception. Um, I am the one who was conceived without sin. So it's a a beautiful, a beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful words. She goes on here to say that the lady told me always to bring a blessed candle to the grotto and then bring it home with me. But on this day, on March the 25th, she asked me to leave it lighted at the grotto. And to this day, candles have always been burning at Massabielle. I noticed that Our Lady would often look over my head to single out individuals in the crowd. She would then smile on them as though they were old familiar friends. Nor did she forget the town officials who caused my parents such distress. All finally believed in the apparitions and died with a crucifix pressed to their lips. And Jacome, the one who caused great trouble, he admitted our opposition was in vain. Bernadette had the Immaculate Virgin Mary on her side. Isn't that beautiful? it can almost seem like God chooses particular people, and you can ask, well, why did God choose that particular individual? Does God love that person more than me? But what I think the words of comfort there are that Our Lady looks at all these other individuals. You know, she singles out individuals in the crowd. She looks at them as if they were old familiar friends. So all of us are seen by God, and we're seen by His mother.
Yeah. She has a broader vision than what people might expect, right? I mean, it's not simply that she only is interested in Bernadette. As we pointed out earlier, she has this broader broader view. You know, the last time that Bernadette goes down to the grotto to see the lady, she's on the other side of the river, because she can't get down there now, and she's having to. They said, "But how can you see? There are so many boards, and the river makes the distance so wide. How can you see?" And she said, I don't see the river. I don't see the boards. I just see her." But what's quite interesting is that um, now Bernadette herself is displaced. That what has begun here with her, she describes herself as Our Lady's broom. You know, what do you do with a broom? You bring it out, you sweep the floor with your broom, and then you put the broom behind the cupboard. Oh, sorry, behind the door. You know, out of sight, out of mind. Bernadette now is becoming displaced. That this is more than her. This is bigger than Bernadette. But that Bernadette, as this young woman who was uneducated and overlooked and reviled and despised, and uh, with a humble family, and you know, this is who God chose to be the one to carry this message and these graces to the world through. And you see that also mirrored in other apparitions too. So the children at Fatima, Bernadette being a young shepherdess living with her nursemaid. Bernadette, when she was very, very young, her mum spilt a candle as she was breastfeeding Bernadette, and the candle like set her dress on fire, and the mother was burned, and so she stopped breastfeeding, and then Bernadette was sent to a neighboring village where she was nursed and weaned by a lady who'd lost her own child. But that family remained close to them, and she'd always bring little treats for them. And Bernadette, when she was a bit older, went there hoping to learn her catechism, and ended up looking after the sheep for quite a while before coming back. And that's then when the apparitions began. But again, so like the children in Fatima, she has this humble background. She doesn't understand everything, but she can relate what she sees. And notice she doesn't put interpretations on what she's saying. She's just saying, I said this, she did that, I saw this. The lady smiled, the lady looked sad, the lady did this, or the lady didn't appear, this time, or and what have I done to displease her? The lady said, repent and do penance. The lady said, come and wash, come and bathe. And by the end, Bernadette, like so many pilgrims, is there at a distance, seeing the lady from afar. She's displaced, and you can go now because now the sanctuary, the shrine, encompasses that part as well, and you can go and stand on that bank. There's a chapel just behind, I think, the chapel of St Bernadette, and you can look out over the grotto and see what she saw. Well, maybe you won't quite see the lady, but you'll see the grotto, and you'll see the rock of Massabielle, and you'll be able to see the little niche where the lady stood. So it's a remarkable story, but there is more to Bernadette than the apparitions. Her personality, her humor. She goes on to, of course, to become a religious. What's very interesting is that her name was supposed to be Bernard Marie, and when she was baptized, the priest who baptized her called her Marie Bernard, putting Mary's name before St Bernard's name. and her godparent got very indignant and insisted he change the baptismal record, and that she was Bernard Marie. But when Bernadette entered religious life, it was almost like this priest had foreshadowed her vocation and what would happen, because she took the name Marie Bernard when she became a nun. And a lot of people would say that even before the apparitions, Bernadette was known to be honest and truthful. She said her prayers. She was pious. She cared about pleasing the Lord. She kept the feast days and things. And so there was a holiness about her, and something. People describe her eyes as well as being very beautiful and captivating. And she was humble, um, humble but firm. She knew her mind. Um, so there is a holiness about Bernadette's character. Anyway, it's not that she's a saint because she saw Our Lady so much. That there's more to Bernadette than simply the apparitions.
Yeah, I think that's the point that that the Pope makes as well when she's actually canonized later. I think the Pope makes that point. It was the whole of her life. It wasn't just that. She later then receives Holy Communion, and she says that it's as if Mary prepared her personally for this moment of meeting Christ in the Eucharist, meeting our Lord rather beautifully. So then, as you said earlier, she dies very young, 35, and her last words are, "Mother of God, pray for me, poor sinner, poor sinner." And she dies, and then almost immediately there's a clamor for her to be declared a saint, but that doesn't happen straight away. It happens many years later, which I imagine really Bernadette would have appreciated that as well. But after she dies, people rush to Lourdes, and still, people travel in their hundreds of thousands, even millions, to go to Lourdes to pay pilgrimage, really, to go on pilgrimage there, to return to the Lord, to repent, and to believe in the gospel. Beautifully, there are priests that go there for confessions, to hear confessions, and people bathe in the waters as well. And there are processions with the candles, as there were at the time that Bernadette was alive. So if you haven't been to Lourdes, I encourage you to go take up a pilgrimage. You can go on your own, or you can go with a group as well. And I always say the really amazing thing about Lourdes is that the world seems to be flipped upside down there. It's as if it's how the world should be, where the poor are put first, and you go in service of others, and that when they're who's given pride of place are the poor, the sick, the needy. They're the ones that are given priority, as it should be. And the people who are well are the ones who serve them. And they're all journeying towards Christ. They're all being pointed towards a closer relationship with Him rather beautifully.
Another thing that's quite interesting on that point, when people think about the healings, very often they think about the waters. Now, there was a lady who experienced the healing in the baths. She went into the baths, and she said she was never been before, and she was worried because her friends told her it's so cold it'll take your breath away, and that's true. It is very cold, but she thought her friends were playing a cruel trick on her, because she said when I got into the water was warm. And Bernadette, after the first apparition, Bernadette is crossing a small like canal, I suppose, that leads up to the stream. And she said, I was surprised that the water was not cold, but the water was warm. And this is in February, and that's going to be, melted snow from, the mountains and things coming down there. And she finds the water warm. But the place where the not the apparitions, the place where most of the miracles have occurred, it's during the benediction. You have the Eucharistic adoration, and then you have the benediction, the blessing with the Blessed Sacraments, that blessing of Christ, and that's a lot of the time where these miracles have happened. But it's so rich in symbolism, that the water, reminding us of our baptism, encouraging that repentance, and also it being cold that we're doing penance. Also, the candles with the torchlight procession, people will process, and it's dark, and all you see when you look around are just little lights everywhere, candles everywhere, shining out in the darkness of the world. And you see that you're not alone, and people of many different tribes and tongues and peoples and nations. Yes, I'm quoting the Book of Revelation there. So it is a foretaste and a glimpse of heaven in that way, so it's
and even just people singing together as well. You
the
have some of these
harmony.
songs,
Mm.
but you have these songs going on and using different languages. People singing to God together, joining in voice together, and of course the candles they point to the light of the world, and they point really to Christ himself as well. And interesting there also, I think. Somewhere in the account that Bernadette is asked about the waters, and no, sorry, something else I was thinking was they tested the water to see if there was anything in the water itself that would bring about these healings. Maybe there was a higher mineral content or something like that, some higher healing properties or something. But Bernadette herself maintained throughout her life that that the water could only heal through faith and prayer. Yeah, the faith and prayer that's reflected in the individual and the joint prayer, really, of the people who go there together. So these things come together, which we see in the sacraments, the physical and the material and the immaterial, the physical and the
The
spiritual.
living water, of course, is not so much the water of Lourdes, but Jesus Christ himself. As Jesus himself says, I'm the living water. And you come here, you come here to drink at the well. But if you knew who it was who was asking you for water, you would ask me for water, and you would have a spring that would never die, coming up here. So all of this imagery is Christological imagery. There's also a great legend about the statue, the crown statue of Our Lady, which is in this sort of esplanade. And apparently this crown statue, was supposed to be facing away from the church towards the people sort of walking down the esplanade. And they came back and the statue is facing the church, walking towards the church rather than with the back to the church. Um, and this apparently they tried to turn it around, and when they came back, it was back around the other way again. At least that's one of the stories that they tell there. Maybe it's apocryphal. I don't know that one. Uh, but it's great, isn't it? I mean, it's a wonderful place. I mean, being able to go in to serve the sick. There's a hospital on site, as well as you were saying before. They have processions. They have a Eucharistic procession, a Marian procession. There's the Rosary. There's Mass in the grotto. You go to the baths, and you can take the waters of the spring away with you, and give them to those who are ill. But you're absolutely right. Prayer, penance, faith, repentance, coming back to the Lord. And a lot of people who go there, they're not really sure what they're going to find. It might just be people who are curious. Lots of people go and they say, I don't really believe in God, but I'm coming either to serve the sick, or I'm coming to find out what all this is about. And there's always there's a reason. And I think a bit like the wise men, when they encounter Christ, they go back by a different route. Our society is a very utilitarian society. Your value, your goodness comes from what you can do, what you can earn, your money. And in Lourdes, actually, the sick, who often, some of these people, they can't walk, they can't speak, they might be able to laugh. That's one of the things I noticed, that some people who are quite severely disabled, they try to make people laugh a lot. They might be bedbound, they might not be able to speak, but they understand love and happiness and humor, and they try to spread with other people. And you see that actually what makes life worth living is not pleasure or comfort. Bernadette didn't have a lot of comfort in her life, but her life was a life worth living. And she knew love. She knew God. Uh, so there is a lot that we can learn from Bernadette's example. from Lourdes and the message of Lourdes. Um, yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to say, or should
Yeah,
we?
I
Should
think
we?
we'll wrap up. Obviously,
It's a long episode,
it's a long
James.
episode, but there's
You're welcome.
yeah. There's a lot there. Maybe it's something to sit through with your meal or something.
But there's so
So a
much
lot to
more
dig
that could have
into.
been said, you know? I
Exactly.
mean, we really
Yeah.
skimmed over a lot of
Yeah,
stuff
we
in a
did.
very hand-wavy way. Yeah.
Well, just to finish then, so St Bernadette was canonized in 1933, so a little while after she died. And she was canonized not for, as Brother Thomas said, not for being a visionary of the apparitions, but for the way in which she responded to the grace of God. And I think that's how all of our lives are measured. How do we respond to the grace that we have received from God? And we all receive graces if we have eyes to see those graces. So how will we respond really to
Eyes to
what God
see
has
and
given
ears
us?
to hear.
Yes, yeah, as our good Lord says.
There's that great quote by Thomas Aquinas that you see at the beginning of the film. For those with faith, no evidence is necessary, and for those without faith, no evidence is possible. To prove these things, do we have an open heart to be able to receive this?
Yes, yeah. So, look, I encourage everyone we encourage everyone, look into the life of Saint Bernadette and look at the words of Our Lady of Lourdes, and if you can, go travel to Lourdes and take in that special place. God bless you.